What it is, y'all, it's your old boy Pilk, and as threatened, warned, I guess you could say, we are going to be getting into Wistoria 1 and Sword, specifically the manga. Now, fair warning to you guys, this is going to be what's coming up in Season 2. So if you don't want the spoilers, I understand that. That's why I'm doing this little intro here. Drop me a like, I'd greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you guys when Season 2 drops, and we'll kind of cover the differences there. However, I know a lot of you guys are really waiting for more story. I am too, and so we're going to get into it. Today, we're going to cover Chapter 20, which essentially is where the series kind of drops off, but also at the same rate, there's some stuff in here from the last episode. We'll get to that here in a moment. So, if you guys are ready, let's jump in. So, right out of the chute, we are back at school, and they're mentioning, like, Will got a perfect score in literally everything. They even mentioned later that Liana, Miss Perfect, didn't even accomplish that. This is literally, like, the best somebody can do. And remember, he's done a lot of extracurriculars. He did the tutoring session, I think it was what they refer to it as in here, with Edward, where he almost got unalived. He's done all the dungeon work and all that stuff. And so he literally just has to basically earn one singular solitary point in order to move on to the tower. So, everyone's kind of like interacting here. You meet this kind of new character. I think she was actually in the series, but like extremely briefly. But there's kind of this interaction between Werkner and some of the other teachers regarding kind of Will and how he is perceived in the school. You guys know, like, even though this dude has shown us, the viewer, basically everything that's on the table, the reality is not everybody has seen that. Not everybody is on the same page. So this dude is now studying like mad. He's got one exam. He's got to pass that exam in order to move on to the next level. So he is studying hard. And in fact, they even mentioned, like, hey, we were just in the dungeon. We just did all this stuff. It seems like they got credit for taking down the Cerberus thing, but he mentions the Grand Duke and all that. It's not really mentioned a huge amount, but it seems like they got credit for that, not necessarily the Grand Duke. It's really vague in that regard. But you do get a lot of Colette and Rosti in this chapter. Almost said episode. In this chapter, and we will get to that here in a moment because they really, really heavily allude to what's going on with Rosti here. So, he mentions he got the five points from Edward, and here is where they mention he needs literally just 1 point. And it's driven home that Will is just literally working himself to absolute exhaustion. In fact, Rosti comes over and like plucks the gray hair, and I love it because he taunts Colette. He's like, I'm sorry, did you want to pluck his gray hairs? And she's like, of course. No, I'd never do that. Like, it just, the feud continues, and I love it. The love triangle is real. But they really just kind of harp on the fact that Will has been working his tail off. He's wanted one thing, and one thing only, and he stays dedicated to that. It's actually really impressive. So, in this particular scene of the chapter, they start talking more about Finn, and Will knows practically nothing about the Finn tribe. I think we got a little bit of background on it in the last episode, but I don't think they mentioned it at all in the manga up to this point. So he mentions that they're dwarves, but they're not really dwarves. I think that's just a mistranslation. They're more like halflings. I don't know if they actually call them Palims here, but in the Danmachi light novels and series, they call them Palims. Essentially, that's what they are. They're shorter. They look younger. That they are a long-lived species. I don't know. People. That's going to sound really insensitive, but whatever. They are what they are. And but they're really strong. They're really hardy. If you really want to know more about kind of what they're alluding to, I would highly recommend reading the Danmachi light novels. Especially Volume 8 is really where you get like a lot of the lore behind him, which sucks. They never animated most of that, but nevertheless, you do get a lot of the lore. And then, on this channel we have I'm gonna divulge just digress here for a moment, but we have some from the old gacha game, some of the stories from the story of Fianna, which is like gives you even more. So if you want to go watch that, it's a great deep dive into kind of the lore. And it was literally just a one-off story for a video game, but fantastic. Nevertheless, digression over. Let's jump back in. So essentially, they're kind of discussing Finn, and this is where we get that whole back and forth between Finn and the headmistress Cauldron. So obviously, he brings this sword here. By the way, someone mentioned it in the comments, and when we did the episode review, this does look a lot like Grievous' sword. I think it is an Easter egg from Danmachi. I don't know if it deliberately is or if they just borrowed it heavily or whatever, but it looks very, very similar to her sword. But they call it the Mage Slayer, which is really interesting. It actually sounds a lot like the sword that Will uses, almost like the antithesis of the sword he uses. Because remember, his sword is able to basically absorb and deflect magic power and almost like harness it. Whereas here, this seems specifically designed to kind of nullify magic powers. So they have something similar to this in Marvel Comics, where literally it's a blade that's able to just nullify healing factors. Essentially, this is the Danmachi universe of the same thing. It just seems like it's there to specifically to unalive mages. And, you know, as they'll remind you here in the episode later on, mages are the whole thing. They are the world. And even Finn and Cauldron go back and forth, and this is where he kind of like jumps up on her desk and is like, yeah, you know, like, I'm the one who's supposed to handle the strong dudes. I handle the swords, you handle the wands, and there in between do they mix. And she's just like, yeah, but he's trying to ascend the tower, and I'm not holding him back. And he's like, oh, you witch. Which I don't think that was supposed to be with the W. I think it's a double entendre, but whatever. I don't know how that actually translates in Japanese, to be fair. I'm not versed in that language, unfortunately. Something I should resolve one day. My wife is. I'll actually have her. Should have consulted her before this episode. I might do a deep dive on that too. But nevertheless, good stuff. And of course, Finn just kind of walks away, and you know, they mentioned all we do is transcend the sky. Because remember, and it's real hard to it's real hard to remember because they only mention it every once in a while, but there's literally a barrier in the sky that, as they are discussing this, is slowly dissolving, and they need all the magia essentially to restore it. And if that thing falls, which some people are trying to make happen, all heck gonna break loose, and it is not gonna be cool. But we meet back up with Colette, and she's bringing Will like basically a midnight snack, it seems, a meal, so to speak, and Will is out. Dude has been working his tail off. And Colette tries to sneak a kiss. It's really cute. But of course, Rosti is right there. Rosti is there. And one thing I want you to notice here. Rosti is like always perfectly timed right there. Whenever basically Will needs him. Will doesn't necessarily need him in this situation, but we'll talk about that. This chapter, I think, really confirms my suspicions about Rosti. So what are you doing, Colette? And he's actually got Kiki, funny enough. And she's like, oh, you were about to sneak a kiss, weren't you? And she totally was. She totally was. But yeah, they're having a back and forth. Now, I want you to pay attention to what happens here. So they're just having a little discussion about it, and she says, I hate the Magia Vander. And then they just kind of notice Rosti's looking a little dejected right here. Looking like, if you look at the previous cell here, Rosti very much alert, aware, eyes open. Here, eyes are obscured by the hair. There's a lot going on to unpack here. If you get what I'm going for. I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but we'll get to it. So Rossi's just kind of like, yeah, me too. And kind of you see, that's what I was talking about right there. But yeah, the barrier there, it looks like it's about to go any minute. So yeah, things be progressing. But nevertheless, now we meet back up with Elfie, and she specifically says, Lady Elfaria. Elfaria? Elfaria. It's her official name. It's not Elfie's, Elfaria. Is something the matter? And notice she looks kind of distant. And this is another Danmachi Easter egg we get here. Someone steps in the room, and it is none other than the Elf Queen herself, accompanied by Filvis, and they don't think they mention them by name, but nevertheless, Eleanor the Elf Queen with Lefia and Filvis. Lefia, I'm sorry. Somebody's going to eat me alive in the comments for that one. And Filvis. And she calls her a shut-in, which isn't all too together wrong, but I think that also is pretty telling of her whole situation right now. We always kind of see her with her caretaker here, and she always seems really spaced out. Wink, wink, hint, hint. So she mentions, you're always so confrontational. Are you mad you lost the duel? And she's like, we were limited to ice magic, and we already know that old girl isn't really known for ice magic, where Elfie 100% is. And then this dude pops in, and I am sus of this dude. I mean, obviously, he just kind of looks... He looks menacing. He's just being an all-around just jerk to everybody. And even she calls him a barbarian. And I love that he calls them savages. And I love Elfie is just literally like... He's like, this is my hallway, get lost. And Elfie's literally like, no, you. I love that. It's the best response ever. But we get a little bit more from them, and you see how close this thing is to falling. I get the feeling something bad is going to go down here soon. I've not read ahead. Literally, I've read this chapter, and we're going to cover it chapter by chapter by chapter. You're going to get my raw reactions to the chapters now. So, there are no spoilers. I don't know what is coming necessarily. But we got to go back and we got to talk about this incoming, essentially exam is what it is. And we see that Edward is giving the exam. History and Origins of Magic. Final exam. And as he's administering this, everyone's kind of like, oh, we have to get it from Snape. Oh my God, it's going to be horrible. And he's like, your final exam is one question. Now remember that Will needs 1 point. So this could be like multiple guesses, and we could just be like A, B, C, D, and if he would get enough points to do this. And we know Edward's goal is to stop Will from ascending. So what does he do? I'm giving you a test. What is your test? What is magic? And even Sion's like, this ain't gonna end well. Because guess what? They even mentioned here that, like, even Liana's like, it's just a thing. It's just something you do. It's like a sixth sense almost. It's not something that you can really, like, put into words very easily. But guess what? How does Will equate this? How is Will gonna answer this? And of course, this was by design. But how is Will gonna answer this question? And I love his thought process, because he's immediately like, what is magic? And his answer is, Elvis is like, don't give up. Like she always is. She's always somewhere in the background, rooting him on. And he specifically says, magic is an aspiration. He writes this entire essay about how he strives for magic. Magic is something to strive for, to be desired, to be... And he even mentions, I'm a sword, not a wand. And, of course, Werkner. I mean, Will's biggest, I guess, advocate. And he's just like, what in the hell are you doing, dude? How is he supposed to answer that test? And I love the fact that Edward's even like 40% of them got it wrong. I weep for their futures. That's crazy. That's ruthless. That's completely... It was a no-win scenario. There's no way Will could have answered the question to his satisfaction. And he knew it. This is completely by design. 100%. Make no mistake. And he's like, you asked them that knowing there was one student who couldn't possibly answer. And yeah, he did. He set him up for failure. And guess what? In Edward's defense, he kind of... I mean, it always comes across as really nasty, but he always has some kind of defense. And he's not entirely wrong here. His whole thing is he's like, look, I'm setting him up for the real world. Right now, he is going to get to the tower. He's going to get to the higher education level and fail. He is going to get eaten alive. I think they even call it the mage killer or something like that. He's like, it's impossible. I'm saving him the trouble. Now, we also know that part of that is jealousy and all that. Edward wanted to be a Magia. He was really close to being a Magia and just fell shy of it. So really, in the end, he is kind of doing to Will what happened to him. And a lot of this is definitely out of spite. You can't deny his reasoning. I get it. But let's be fair, it is done more out of spite than care. I'm sure there's a part of it that is a legitimate concern of his. Because, he's cold, he's bitter, and he definitely is not where he wants to be. And I'm sure that there's a part of that I'm obviously from the character perspective, that he thinks he's saving Will. But this is ruthless. And of course, Will failed. He's 1 credit short. Not eligible to ascend the tower. And that is where we leave off Chapter 20, Volume 6. And I'm actually really glad that they did not finish the season here. I'm really, really, really glad that they saved this for the beginning of Season 2, because I get the feeling that this is going to be his main motivation for everything that happens in Season 2. So I am excited to see this animated. I get the feeling this is going to be like Episode 1, Season 2, kick in the junk, and, Will has to come back from this. So, guys, we're going to cover Chapter 22 here in the next couple of days. We're probably going to try to do like a chapter every other day until we catch up. I don't know if I'll be able to keep up quite that pace, but make sure you guys subscribe if you haven't already. And I will continue with our manga read coming up here really soon.